Hello, everyone, and welcome to another book-based interview where today we talk to author Nicolette Andrews. Nicolette is a fantasy romance author that has written numerous novels that combine elements of fantasy and mystery. If you're interested in following Nicolette's journey, please check out her website at www.nicoletteandrews.com, and that website will have all her other social media platforms. And as always, if you enjoy these book-based interviews, please drop a like and subscribe. Nicolette, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Of course, of course. So, going into our first question, what made you want to become an author?
Ooh, I think it's just always been in me to like tell stories because my sister always quotes this. She's like, when we were kids, I would like make up little plays for our like daycare to like play out. And so it's just like it was just like and I was always writing like stupid little kids books like totally plagiarizing those feeling shapes books like the Mr. like what was it Mr. Triangle and stuff like and I like would rip off stuff like that as a kid. So it's like I've always just been kind of like that kind of person that just like big imagination, big like just like to tell stories and stuff like that. So I think it's just always been it was always something I was going to do, I think.
Oh, that's awesome. What did you like about that? So, when you were looking at these stories as a little kid, like, what really connected with you? Was it the fact that, like, it just told a story that you've never seen before? Or, like, was it, like, the creativity aspect of it in the sense where it's like, oh, wow, like, look at the pictures and just look at everything that, like, kind of creates the overall story? Like, what really intrigued you, like, at such a young age?
I think it was just I liked stories because
Mm.
like I was a big reader as a kid too. I was like one of those kids that would like walk out of the library with a huge stack of books.
Oh, okay.
So I just liked stories. And we also like as kids, me and my sister used to like beg my mom to tell us about like her childhood. Be like, Mom, tell us about that one time that you like took the brakes off the car and the car started rolling down the hill and stuff like that. So it was just like I've always loved stories. As a kid, I thought like, oh, I like the pictures, but I really just like stories. I just like tell like I just like people and I like stories and I like hearing like about people's experiences and stuff like that. Even from a young age, I really liked like just everything about the making things up, the creativity, the story part of it.
That's awesome. That all being said, then, why fantasy romance?
Another thing too, where it's like I my best friend in middle school was a big fantasy reader, and she introduced me to this series called Unicorns of Valinor.
Mm.
And I it was like one of the first fantasy books I read, and it like changed my brain chemistry where I was like, oh my god, the because I was a horse girl and I was like, oh my god, these horses have horns. And it was like and it was just so magical. It was like a portal fantasy, and I was just like it opened my eyes to like how much more expansive the world could be, like where it wasn't rigid, where it's like, oh, it's your day to day. It's like there's like it was like this whole unseen realm outside of ourselves basically.
Got it. So, going into that experience in middle school, just reading stories and stuff, when did you take that leap from becoming a reader into becoming a writer? And what was that process like from reading stories and then gaining the courage to be like, you know what, I'm going to create my own fantasy story?
I didn't write a fantasy story until I was an adult.
Hmm.
I in high school I really got into creative writing. Like I had some really good English teachers that really made me want to creatively write. And a lot of it was just like short stories and like just like semi poetic nonsense. But then like after I graduated high school, got really into writing fan fiction, and a lot of that was more contemporary stuff. Like it was like fantasy, like it was like literally like fantasy stuff that I would reimagine into contemporary settings. And a friend I met in fan fiction was writing a fantasy book, and then one year we were like, "Oh, let's write like a short story for each other as a gift." And I just wrote this one short story, and I was like, "Man, I really like writing fantasy." Like, and I got excited about it, and then I wrote a whole trilogy off like based off of this short story I had written her.
Wow.
Like it ended up being nothing like the short story, but like it grew from there. It's like I was like, wow, this is actually really fun to make up worlds and like make up like magic systems and stuff like that. So it just kind of like happened organically.
Wow, that's awesome. I think that's
Yeah.
really cool how it started off with a short story and then it just expanded into a whole trilogy.
Yeah.
That must be one crazy chapter for you to just see a short story and be like, oh, wait a minute, I can expand this into like,
Yeah.
yeah, that's cool. That's awesome. This actually leads into like our next question. How do you come up with new concepts to wrap a book series around? Because I've checked out your website and you have a good amount of books already out.
Yeah.
But how do you like? Do you just naturally come up with these scenarios? You're like, oh, this would be a great trilogy, or is there just something out there that like you go to where you're like, oh, wait a minute, I want to brainstorm a new concept, and oh, snap, this is great. Like, let's write books around it.
It's funny because like when I started out, I didn't know how to like structure things, and I would like there's some series that like are I was like I just decided randomly. I was like, yeah, it'll be 5 books. Like my 5 book series. I was like, yeah, it'll be five based on nothing, based on vibes. I and like when I first started out, it was a lot of just like I would get more ideas than I had, or I would just find ideas. But now it's a lot of times I know more about storytelling after writing so many books, where I know like this is only going to make a trilogy's worth, like this is only a trilogy's worth of material, or like this is a standalone's worth of material. So now it's more just instinct, but back then it was mostly vibes when I first started. Like my first like probably 10 or so books, it was just like I like it's like I used to tell people like I'm like, how do you make the idea stop? Because I couldn't like I always I there was a period in my career where I was like writing like 4 different series at once,
Wow.
because I just like I had so many ideas and I had to write them all. And now I'm better about like being like, wait, like don't write it down. If it's that pressing, you'll come back to it, like. So it's more methodical now, but it used to be very very chaotic when I first started.
Yeah, no, I can only imagine. I think that's really cool how you would wake up and you're like, yeah, I'm gonna write a quintuple series, 5 books, and I'm just gonna go with it. And people are
Yeah,
like, 5 books, like that's insane. Most
yeah,
people can't even write one book, if they
yeah,
really, if they, at first hand, and then here you are being like, yeah, I got 5 on the way, like I'm about to create a
yeah.
whole thing. That's really awesome, and I like how you mentioned how in the beginning you were writing multiple things at the same time, like multiple stories, and then now it kind of shifted into you writing one story at a time. And I just wanted to ask, why that shift? Was there something that you noticed that you benefited more from when you stuck to one story at a time, or did you just not like the chaos of just writing with a bunch of stories in your head?
Realized I have really bad memory,
Mm.
and like I would like lose plot points between books if I like started too many. So for me, for my sanity, I have to like just focus on one thing, because it's like I'll forget like B and C plots, and then I'll like have to go back and reread it. I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot about that guy, or something like that. And it's like I'm like somewhere between a pantser and a plotter. Like I have a general idea how things end, and like I always tell my husband it's like if I was driving from San Diego to Sacramento, it's like I know that there's a road, like I know I'm gonna take the 5 most of the way there, but it's like I don't know what I'm gonna see along the 5. And that's kind of how like my creative process is, where it's like I don't know if I'm gonna drive through, what restaurant where I'm gonna stop, for a rest stop or whatever. So it's like knowing keeping it all together, there's less chances for me to forget like the random stops along the way and stuff like that. So it makes more sense now for me to just do it all together.
Right.
And also just from a business sense, it's like my 5 book series, it took me from 2015 until 2024 to finish it. So it's like a lot of like just the nature of this industry is like people are just going to forget you. So it's like by the time you could have a really good book 1, but by the time you get to book 5, if it takes you almost a decade to finish it, people are going to be like, oh, I've dropped off, I forgot about it, you weren't updating it as fast as I wanted you to, and stuff like that. So it's partially for my own memory and also partially a business decision.
Yeah, no, I think you just said some great words right here. I think the metaphor of driving and,
Yeah.
the stops along the way, I think is very, it's a great metaphor for how the creative process is, because I totally get you. I think there's a lot of people that are, are either watching this or just living life where, they have a general idea where they want to go, but, sometimes you don't really know what's going to get in the way, or what you're going to see along the way when you're getting to that
Yeah.
destination.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
yeah, and I've heard a lot of people say that about their career maybe, or like
Mhm.
things and like how they want to go about life. But I like how you're also applying that metaphor to your creative process as well, and it's so true,
Yeah.
because our brain, sometimes you just get random ideas. Yeah, I use the notes app on my phone all the time. I have a very bad memory as well sometimes, and I'm like, I'll wake up at 3 in the morning, in like a cold sweat. Like I had a crazy dream and I have an
Yeah,
idea, and I'm like, I know if I go back to sleep, this idea will never come back to me. So I will
100%.
force myself to get on my notes app and write, like, this is a
Yeah,
crazy idea. And then I'll wake up and I'll be like, oh, this idea was stupid anyways. I don't know why I wrote
yeah,
this
yeah,
down.
yeah,
But no, I think that's awesome. And I also really like how you bring up another side of writing that I think only authors see, while readers, I don't think about it too much. It's that business decision about how you want to create that sense of relevancy as the series continues without like kind of losing that following, because
yeah.
I know, like, for example, the classic example of George R. R. Martin, he's still
Hmm.
writing his books, and you can hear the frustration in the community that,
Yeah,
love the show, love the books, and like, when is he going to finish the series? And
yeah,
I could totally see how, as a writer, of course you want to finish the books, but I think that when you're creating a series, there's a different sense of pressure that comes with, like, hey, I gotta also finish the story in a proper timeline that allows the target audience to kind of follow along without feeling like, oh my gosh, like I forgot everything or I'm not interested. Um,
yeah,
I feel the same way about TV shows, actually. Like, when a season
yeah,
finishes, I'm like, wow, that was amazing. By the time season
yeah,
two comes, I'm like, I always ask, I always wonder, like, is there a recap in the beginning of each episode? Because I need that. Like, not only do I
yeah,
have a really bad memory, but, after a certain amount of time, you just naturally kind of fall
yeah,
off from the idea. So I think that's really interesting how you bring that up as an author. Because I
yeah,
think as a reader, you don't really see it that way. You're just seeing it as like,
yeah,
come on, like, where's the book? Like, I want to do this, I
yeah,
want to do that. So
yeah.
yeah, of course. Thank you so much. And, I know that your bio also mentions that you enjoy playing like cozy video games. And I'm just curious, like, have any book ideas been inspired by this hobby of playing video games? Because I think that's a whole other immersive world to just get inspiration from.
Yeah. I'm trying to think if I've ever been inspired by any video games. I know I play like I need a lot of like thinking time,
Mm-hmm.
and I've played like my current series that's in progress. I spend a lot of time playing Animal Crossing and just like kind of like just going through methodical tasks and thinking about it, but I don't know if it's ever directly inspired anything that I can think of. Because like I love stuff like Stardew and I love stuff like Animal Crossing and stuff like that, but I don't those are there's so, a lot of the cozy games I play, they're so open worlds.
Mm-hmm.
There's not a whole like I haven't found a whole lot where I'm like, oh yeah, that would be a great plot
Right.
that I can not that I can think of. I do find inspiration from random things, but not I don't think anything from video games.
Well, if it's not video games, do you have any other form of media? Or I guess just to like kind of generalize the question a bit more, what do you think you go to for inspiration when you are creating your story, especially as an adult? Because I know, like, in middle school you
Yeah,
mentioned that unicorn series to kind of get you into
yeah.
the realm, but as an adult, when you're just going about your world and you're just like living your life, where do you think you kind of see elements of inspiration where you're like, oh, that would probably evolve into something special?
Yeah, so it's kind of all over. Like I read a lot still. Like I'm a big reader.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes I'll see stuff in a book and I'll be like, "Oh yeah, I want to explore that more." Like just like different like character dynamics sometimes yeah, I want to explore more. Like and also obviously everything's very tropified now. So like I'll see tropes and be like, "Oh, I've never done that." But there's also sometimes just character personalities like there's one that's like I've seen a couple times where people it's like the kind of like male character where he's like, oh, I'll make her worse, and I keep thinking I'm like, oh, I've never really done that, and I like I'll kind of file it away and be like, well, maybe I'll do that, maybe I'll add that in sometime where I'll just like a general vibe of like, oh, I'll make her worse, but also like just other random things inspire me. Like my kid was really into My Little Pony when they were little, and like. And I like, there's this whole thing in My Little Pony where there's like one of the princesses is like a sun princess and one of the princesses is a moon princess, and I realized recently I was like, oh, that really did inspire some of the world building in my current in progress series. And it's like such it's not like and it's such a random thing and it just kind of burrowed in my brain for years before it ever came out on the page. So it's like stuff like that. It's just like just being around and just consuming like all kinds of media. Like I'm really into K dramas too, so I like that's where I got really into fake engagements, and my current in progress book has a fake engagement plot line. So it's like kind of all over. Just I consume a lot of media, so I try to like kind of like piece together like ideas from like media and just like things I generally like I've like dragons. I've never done a vampire book, but I've always like had it kind of like, oh, maybe one day I'll do a vampire book kind of thing where I just like I'll see stuff and I'll get inspired. I'll be like, yeah, I'll remember that. Or sometimes it changes entirely by the time it gets to the page because I'll kind of percolate on it like a crock pot for a while before I'll ever actually start anything.
Right. I think
Yeah.
that's natural as a creative, which is
Yeah.
to admire other forms of creativity. I think, you saying that you absorb a lot of media, I think would make sense because you yourself, the way you operate, the way you think and create stories is you're creating that type of media where it's very immersive worlds with a lot of romance, mystery, character development, plot
Yeah.
changes. And I feel like the only way you grow from that is, of course, by writing and creating it yourself, but to also look at other forms of media that kind of does the same thing. Because if you if you do that, it kind of helps you maybe understand or just cement some lines of understanding how to go about your world. And I think, as you become a creative, I think you have a natural appreciation for other people that take that further step in making their worlds and doing their things. And I
Yeah.
think that's really cool how, you're playing video games, you also watch a bunch of TV shows, you're also using your family life as well to kind of help you inspire some other things in your
Yeah.
stories. So it just feels like a natural development, I guess, like it just feels like a
Yeah.
natural process to say, I'm looking at all these things, I have my family, and wow, like that's cool. I'm gonna add this to my, my list of things that I want to, invest into my story. So that's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
And this kind of leads me into our next question. Out of all the book series or book standalones that you've written, which one is one of your personal favorites, and why would you choose that?
So I always say that this is like a running thing with me where it's like the newest thing I've written is always the best thing and always my favorite thing I've written.
Mm,
And I think it's because like a lot of my process is growing and learning to be a better creative.
yeah.
So like every time I write a new book, it's like I learn something new about the writing process and I learn something new about myself because a lot of it is like there is like a little bit of introspection that you kind of go through when you're writing a book where you're like, "Oh yeah, I guess that is how I feel about XYZ." So like my favorite book that I've written so far is Dragon's Deception, which is like my newest one, and then like the sequel to it is also one of my favorites too because it's like the newest one I've written because I just think it's like I feel I tell people like when I meet them in person at events they'll ask me, oh, where do I start, and I say here because it's like it really is the culmination of like all 18 books that I wrote before it,
Mm-hmm.
like all built up into one. And I think it was the most fun to write. It was a passion project from COVID, and it just like it was like when I like got to like the lowest part where I was like kind of burnt out, like that's what I wrote, and that was the most fun to write for me. So I think it's the best, and I think it's the most fun to write.
Awesome. Do you ever get that moment where you kind of look at your previous work and you're kind of like not critiquing yourself, but you're looking at it and you're like, "Oh man, like that's how I wrote that," or like, "Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
like, yeah, that I could totally see that." And I think that's also a natural thing as well because I can relate with even these author interviews.
Yeah.
The first author we met, her name was Amy Spalding, and I
Mhm.
remember just being nervous. Like
Yeah.
I am like completely like I get sweaty hands and my hands are just sweaty. I'm just like in my
Yeah.
head I'm like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, and I'm freaking out. And we're fast forward to where we are now talking to you, and I just
Yeah.
feel a lot more like what you're saying, like a lot more in tune with the process.
Yeah.
I feel more comfortable, I feel more confident, and I think whenever you're creating something, I feel like a lot of people say that you just gotta do it that first time. Because if you do it the first
Mhm.
time, that's the hardest part. Because you're going from literally nothing to something, and then when you do decide to keep on creating more, it just builds onto that skill set. And
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, and I think that's great. How I think that's a really great moment when you're able to look at your previous work and not really like critique it in a way where it's like negative, where it's like, oh my gosh, like I was so bad, but it's kind of like a growing point where you look at your reading
Mhm.
and your writing and you kind of go, oh wow, like I really grew from that. And I think it
Mhm.
must also feel so great when people ask you like, hey, where do I start? And you can just
Yeah.
confidently say like right here because this is where I'm at right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I guess like I'm wondering like compared to when you first started, are there
Mhm.
some things that you've noticed that you've grown on immensely compared to like when you first started writing? And like what were
Oh,
some
yeah.
things that you noticed that you're like, wow, I'm really happy that I was able to kind of build on that?
So I honestly, across the board, I think I'm better at everything.
Mm,
I think my prose are a lot stronger. I think that my character development is a lot more nuanced and layered than it was. I think the pacing is a lot better, a lot more like the story structure is a lot better
mm-hmm,
than my first book. Like my first book was like probably the most chaotic because like and that's the thing you said about like looking back on it. It's like not a critique, but it's like you should look back on your old stuff and be like, see your growth because that's how you know you've grown. It's like just like measuring a child against a door frame. You want to see progression over the years. So it's I do feel like I'm all round. I mean, I'm not saying I'm like, oh, I'm perfect and I'm a master now, but like I can definitely see a difference. But when I go back to like my first to my most recent, like the growth, even like books I wrote to a couple years ago, I see the growth. Like there's always like these like up down, like there's like you plateau sometimes, but there's always growth at every stage, and I'll probably keep growing until like the day I die or get so arthritic I can't write anymore, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I I totally get that. I think that's one of those things that also comes with like wanting to like share your work with people. I don't think that want ever stops. I don't think there's really
Yeah,
an age where you're like, okay, I hit 50, I'm kind of done. I'm never going to
yeah,
share anything again. I feel like that'll always naturally be there. And I think if anything, as you get older and as you just get better and better, maybe it just opens other avenues to express yourself. I think it's great when an author, that created an amazing story ends up getting an ability to create like a television adaptation, because that's like
yeah,
another option of like creativity with something that you hold dearly. Or like, I know a lot of people, there are authors that we've interviewed that love, implementing music and playlists into their
hmm,
stories. And
yeah,
that's really great because that's another form of expression. So I
yeah,
think time just kind of just gives you that really great ability to see how you can just grow more and more and just express yourself
yeah.
and do other things with that initial idea. And I guess this kind of segues into our next question really nicely. But what's your advice for new readers that are out there wanting to release their own book, or maybe to generalize a little bit more to broaden it? Like, say it's somebody wants to be a creative, they want to express themselves, but they don't know what to do, or if they kind of see value in that process.
Mhm.
What would be your advice for somebody that wants to take that push, but they're kind of hesitant?
I think that people need to be okay with failure
Mm,
because, like, there's a lot of stuff that I've written that will never see the light of day. Like, there's like well, it's gone forever because it was on a laptop that died. But I like my first novel never got published. It was like it was a big hot mess of random ideas. But I'm a big believer in growth mindset and like the idea that nobody's inherently born with talent, and no and you can learn almost anything, and writing is a lot of learning. It's such a complex art form. Like I mean like any art form, but you're evoking pictures with words. So you have to learn to just be okay with being bad at it at first.
right,
Like just the same way like when somebody starts out drawing, they're not going to be perfectly anatomically correct
right.
with their first drawing. It's going to be very two-dimensional and flat, and you just have to keep doing it and be okay with it being bad,
Yeah.
and just keep and then seek out like people that will give you honest feedback, because it's like you can get caught in an echo chamber where you're like you finish your first book and then you have your friends and family and they're all like, yay, good job, and your friends and family just want you to feel good, but they mean well, but you're not going to grow from like being in an echo chamber. So just like being willing to fail and seeking out like honest critique from like your peers. Like there's a lot of writing groups that you can find online that will like will swap critiques, or if you have like a local writer community, they're always so friendly. I love my local writer groups. Like they're always so good to like just build community and find others like and there's so many resources. There's so many books. I mean I could list off like 100 books that I would recommend for writers like that like want to learn the craft, but it's just you just got to get started and be okay with being bad at first.
Yeah, thank you so much for that advice. And I think that
Yeah.
really resonates because I think what I really, I don't know why it just clicked with me while you were saying it. Like, people that are scared of failure, I think, need to understand that failure is so temporary. Like, it's such a present thing that by the time you work on yourself in the future, that failure is just not even in the picture anymore.
Yeah.
Like, being bad now doesn't mean you're going to be bad forever. It just means
Yes.
you're just bad now, and that's okay
Yeah,
because you're
exactly.
learning it. And I think, I don't know. I don't know where this really comes from. Maybe it's from like previous standards of what people put on us, or like the world that we live in and stuff. But I feel like there's a
Mhm.
lot of people that are just so scared to fail because they don't want to express themselves and they find out they're bad at doing it, because it's like, how could you be bad at expressing yourself? It's such a personal
Yeah.
thing. And then you
Yeah.
create something and you're like, oh, like, it's just not what I wanted. But
Yeah.
I think that's the beauty of it, because when you do get to the point where you create something that you're proud of, and truly in the sense where it's like, yes, you could still always critique it and be like, yeah, I could have done this better, but to have that sense of accomplishment where it's like, I did it. I think it's the
Yeah.
journey that you're the most proud of, right? Like the destination, of course,
Yeah.
is amazing. You write an amazing book, of course, people are gonna love it. But when you see where you started to where you are now, the failures end up becoming talking points. It becomes sources of empathy for those that are
Hmm.
also starting. And I really appreciate how you kind of just started with that, because I feel like that's
Yeah.
probably something a lot of people have issues with,
Yeah.
dealing with
Oh yeah.
failure. Um,
Yeah.
no, I really appreciate that, and I think that I think I could definitely personally
Yeah.
take that into my own life, and especially when you're doing something like starting a company with BookBase and everything, you
Yeah.
know, the one thing that you learn in business school is like, hey, by the way, the odds are you're probably going to fail. Does
Yeah.
that mean you shouldn't try? No, go for it.
Yeah.
But does that
Yeah.
mean it's guaranteed? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
But I think that's what creates a lot of gratitude when you do get to that
Yeah.
point of like, hey, like, look what we did.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that advice,
Yeah,
and
of
this
course.
leads into our next question. So I know you kind of teased the sequel to the story that you're writing, that you just released, but what's in the future for you?
So I'm working on the final book in the trilogy. The second book in Dragon's Deceptions comes out in December, but the I'm in progress on the trilogy. I have a million other projects. I do a lot of in-person events, so I'll be around, especially in Southern California, and like I'm going to a couple of places in the West Coast next year. So I'm just like a lot of stuff. It feels like a lot, but I do a lot of in-person events. I'll be at a lot of in-person events. I'll be like releasing more books. Like, I mean, I've been doing this for 12 years, so it's like there's always going to be something.
Right.
Like I'm always like you're saying, like with business, it's just like you're always going to persevere. You just have to persevere. So I'm just going to keep doing the same thing, more books, more events, more everything.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, you're talking like you're a celebrity, and you are. Like, that's awesome. Like, people are gonna recognize you when you go to these events, and people be like, "Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
like Nicolette, like these stories are so great." I was also wondering. This kind of just got came to mind, but I know you create a lot of fantasy romance. But are there other forms of fiction that you want to explore? Like, I know there's cyberpunk, and there's also like steampunk, or there's other versions of fantasy like sci-fi and stuff, where it's like you can kind of like mix things together. Are there other genres that you're interested in, or is it most like fantasy? Like, you just love fantasy.
Just love fantasy.
Hmm.
In the past I've thought about doing like branching out into like sci-fi and stuff like that, but I never had like enough of an idea where I was like, yeah, I love reading all of it. I love like westerns. I love like sci-fi. One of my friends wrote a really great cyberpunk fantasy recently that I just absolutely adored called Neon Flux. So I love all that stuff. I just like I don't know if I have so many fantasy ideas. I don't know when I would have time to write something else, and like and I haven't had an idea that was so good where I was like, oh, I have to write this. Like I have to deviate from like what's established in my like pen name to like to nothing's caught me enough, like nothing's got me by the throat where I'm like I gotta write it, you know what I mean?
Right. Right. No, I totally get that. No, yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. It's so interesting because I feel like once you get into fantasy, it's like opening Pandora's box. Like,
Oh
everything
yeah.
just shoots out, and you're like looking at how people use sci-fi, and this is really reminiscent with TV shows and movies today, where you see a little bit of mixing of genres now, where you're
Hmm.
starting to see things like sci-fi, but like with a little bit of fantasy elements into it,
Hmm.
or medieval fantasy, and then you start getting a
Yeah.
little bit of futuristic side to it. So that's really cool how, we live in a world where you can just explore stuff like that. And, I'm
Yeah.
really excited to see what stories you create in the future as well, as you're just developing more fantasy elements and more ideas
Yeah.
and concepts. But yeah, no, thank you so much. And this kind of leads into our last question. So, for BookBase, we are very much big in creating a community of readers,
Mhm.
and our app is dedicated for those that would want to create book clubs and kind of socialize with people. And I just wanted to ask, it's like a fun question, but have you ever been
Yeah.
a part of a book club, or have you ever socialized with people around books?
I've never been in a formal book club, but me and my sister say we have a book club because I like everything I read, I pass on to her.
Mm-hmm.
What I do socially with books is I do a lot of book events.
Mm,
So, which is so like healing to be with people that love what you love.
right.
Like just like there's it's so cool to be like I usually vend at them and like do signings and stuff, but it's like I've met so many of my friends through bookish events, like doing like where I met Janelle at the KPBS book fair. It was like it's like you it's just they're so fun. It's just like the energy. It's like finding your people, and it's just like everybody gets it. Like everybody gets your references. It's so wonderful. So that's my favorite bookish community thing that I do regularly.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think that's, I never even thought about that. I feel like only authors kind of think like that about how
Yeah,
book events is an opportunity to meet people that you love,
yeah,
writing stories with, or just like meeting people that love reading the stuff that you're creating.
yeah,
I think it'd be cool for readers as well to just go to book events and meet other people as well that they really are like, hey, like you like
yeah,
this book? I love this book. Like we should talk
yeah.
about it. So that's really
Oh yeah,
cool. That's a really great aspect of socializing around books that I feel like isn't really talked about, but you really just shed light on it, and I really
yeah,
appreciate that. Thank you. Um,
yeah.
but yeah, no, Nicolette, thank you so much. This kind of leads us towards the end of the interview, but for those that are watching this, thank you guys so much for watching. Once again, please check out her website at nicoletteandrews.com if you are interested in following her on her journey, and that's where you can also find Nicolette's other social media channels like her Instagram. But again, if you guys really enjoy these book-based interviews, drop a like, drop a subscribe. But again, Nicolette, thank you so much for being here. It was great talking to you.
Yeah, it's great talking to you too.